goes live in 2 minutes. Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello there and good morning to you. A sunny morning in Pittsburgh today. It is Thursday, the 12th? Yeah, it's the 12th of May. Who knew? Well, I'll tell you what, we're doing something a little unusual today. I haven't had a lot of guests on the show of late, but I read a review of this gentleman's book in the, I believe, Wall Street Journal, and I thought, damn, somebody wrote my book. I heard that. So Tom Huth is the gentleman in question, and his book is 40 Years Stoned, a journalist's romance. Hi, Tom.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Are you stoned now?
No. Great question. I would say no more than usual, but actually it's only 7 in the morning in California, so I will have to say no.
So that's too early for you?
Yeah, but after I read the newspaper and have my first coffee and just sit down to write, well, by 8 or 9, you never know what's going to happen.
Okay. Now, this is I'm hard-pressed to sort of categorize the book. It is a memoir.
Yes. It's
Yes.
my life, yes.
It's your life. And a most unusual one it has been thus far. The most amazing thing to me about your life is that you had a journalist's dream job. You were a feature reporter at the Washington Post, and you left. You just walked away. You, turned on, tuned in, turned on, dropped out.
I dropped out and moved out to Colorado to be a hippie, yes. This was in 1973.
Yeah, right. I remember the years well. I headed out to San Francisco, but never got there. I got waylaid and ended up in New York City. But yeah, there were a lot of us wandering around in that time. People who knew you must have felt you'd lost your mind.
They might have wondered. My colleagues on the Post, actually, I left the Post actually earlier to take a leave of absence and go to the West Indies, and a lot of the people on the Post came up and kind of secretly whispered, I wish I could do that, too.
So you were there, actually, at a rather historic moment. You were there when Woodward and Bernstein were covering a break-in at the Watergate Hotel.
Exactly.
Wow.
And, I was writing feature stories, and they were Right, and once the Post latched onto that story, that's about all the editors cared about was Watergate. So if you weren't on the Watergate team, you didn't get quite as much attention.
What is your sense of those two reporters, since you must have known them?
Well, they frankly, I wasn't great friends with Bob Woodward. He was a very bland kind of a guy. I just thought, and Carl was well, he wasn't. He got in a little trouble with the editors for overuse of company cars and things like that. He just latched onto a good story when he saw it, and good for him.
Okay, so you weren't tight with either.
Not really, but I worked within 20 feet of either one.
Mm-hmm. And the Ben Bradley, what was your sense of him?
Magnificent man. I was totally intimidated. I was a middle-class kid from Detroit with a public school education, and he was a suave Ivy Leaguer with elan, and I was totally intimidated by him.
Which I'm sure he liked.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. So, is this 40 Years Stoned is obvious? Oh, gosh, listen to me. This is what happens when you smoke pot. 40 Years Stoned. Is it... It's a romance. It's a romance with this plant, but it's also a romance with your wife.
Yes, my wife, Holly, my second wife, my partner in adventure, I call her, and the love of my life. 20 years ago, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I have been caregiving for her ever since. And I've found marijuana totally helpful in avoiding caregiver burnout and making the whole job very doable instead of ruining my life. And Holly has used marijuana too to help ease her discomforts and anxieties. So I would suggest, and some people would say, stoned caregiving? How can you take care of a sick woman being stoned? Is that crazy? Aren't you going to fall asleep and miss some big emergency? And that just isn't how marijuana works.
Right.
To me, I can have my head in the clouds and my feet on the ground to do the work I need to do, and it works for me.
And it's given her relief as well.
Yes, it has. And she's frankly very near the end now, and I still give her some drops of cannabis oil some evenings, and it sure brightens her countenance and still makes her life easier.
Did you ever think that you would live to see marijuana legalized?
Pretty amazing this is happening. I happened to be in 1977, the last time marijuana came close to being legalized, when Jimmy Carter was in the White House. I was living in the attic at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, actually, to prepare a book proposal.
Okay, now wait, back up. Because explain that. So you're living in an attic at the headquarters of NORML, the National Organization for the Repeal of Marijuana, or Reform of Marijuana Laws. Marijuana laws. You're living in their attic with a big jar filled with roaches.
Exactly.
Not the bug kind, guys.
No. These were, their NORML's job was to help pot growers and users avoid prosecution, and to reward them, the growers would often send NORML their finest products, and so they would smoke those upstairs and leave these roaches in a jar, and they said, "Oh, well, you can smoke as many of these as you want." I go, "Oh, wonderful." So that was a little job, Benny.
Yeah, quite a job, Benny. So you saw them actually. I do not recall that Carter initially in his presidency came out for decriminalization. I don't recall that at all.
Well, I don't quite recall either, but when I was researching the book, I remembered, oh, yeah. And it actually fell apart because, a dispute between NORML and the White House over the use of paraquat, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
That the Mexicans were spraying on there with our help. And NORML was trying to get that practice stopped. And it turned out the White House was supporting paraquat. And
Paraquat, for those who don't, and anyone who was smoking pot in the 70s certainly feared it. It was being sprayed on the plants in Mexico, and no one had any idea if it was possibly, toxic for humans to ingest. And we were all still smoking this pot, right? And we were very fearful. I don't recall how that actually ended and how they stopped doing it.
I don't either. I just know that Normal had a Christmas party in 1977, and it turned out that Carter's chief drug policy guy named Peter Bourne was caught snorting cocaine at the party. And once the word got out that was true, Jimmy Carter's liberal policies all of a sudden took on a sinister look, and he backtracked on legalization and started prosecuting marijuana laws. And that's but as far as why they stopped using paraquat, I'm not even sure of that. But that's how that liberalization drive for marijuana just kind of dried up.
Got closed down, right?
Yeah.
And never. I mean, that was the end of it for a long, long, long time.
Yes, and then of course Reagan came in with
Just Say No,
Just Say No, and all that stuff. So it was really the support for marijuana legalization leveled off until the turn of the century, and now, of course, it's up in the high 50s or 60%.
Well, the absurdity is, I believe is it still a Schedule 1 drug?
Yes, it's still considered the most dangerous possible drug with no possible medical benefits as dangerous as heroin and cocaine.
But, I mean, obviously, we know that is untrue.
Yeah, but politicians are so far behind. I mean, it's just, I don't know if there's one of our senators or Congress people who would even vote for any kind of a liberal marijuana law. They're just so far behind the curve of what the public wants. I don't know if that'll ever change. I think it'll just happen the way it's happening now. State by state, it's getting legalized, and the federal government isn't stepping in to enforce federal law, or else there'd be armed rebellion in the streets, I think.
You write, pot is my co-pilot. Pot is my refresh button. Pot makes the familiar look new. It makes the mundane suddenly, if temporarily, fascinating. It makes the everyday feel like one of a kind. Not all of the time, no, but enough of the time.
I say that? Yes, that's true.
Yes, you do. But see, I feel the same way. I think pot is the most amazing plant, drug, mood alterer in the world, and I've indulged in a lot of them. I just think it is amazing. It does the same for me. Who wouldn't want to have their appreciation of everything enhanced?
Right. I think I'm at my very best when I'm stoned, and I mean decision making, writing. I'm much more creative when I'm stoned. It just, there isn't any part of my life, and even we won't get into driving, but I don't see any problem with driving.
Well, that's getting to be a big to-do. I just saw a report on it.
AAA, yeah.
Yeah, AAA's.
But this goes against the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration did some extensive tests, and they found out that marijuana drivers on closed course tests were impaired equally as much as drinkers. But once you get on the road, they were safer drivers, stoned, and they theorized, well, people know they're stoned and they drive slower to compensate for it. So I don't know anything that, any reason not to. And of course now, I always thought, since I smoked most of my adult life, I always thought, well, if I live a few years shorter, it will have been worth anyway. I'm willing to make that trade-off. And now, hey, I might even live longer because of smoking dope. So, win-win.
So they're trying. There are some states that are already testing for THC levels in drivers who've had accidents,
Right.
much like they do a breathalyzer test. And people are saying, but that's crazy because THC stays in your body for days and days, weeks, I think.
Yes,
so
I think weeks, yeah. So
yeah.
It's ridiculous to test for. If there's there's a way they could test for people when they're actually, high the first hour or so after ingesting it, that might be worthwhile. But no, testing for THC doesn't make any sense. So,
okay, let's get off the pot a little bit, and talk about your foray into hippiedom and why. I mean, why did that seem like? The times were crazy. The times were a changing and different, and you and I were of a generation that you're a little bit older than I, and as you said, you sort of missed out on you were out of college before the real stuff started happening.
Civil rights movement, which was really drew me, but I was already out of school, married, had a career going, had kids, and I just felt I felt just a little too old to go down south and start marching and leave my family behind, but I felt way too young to escape this siren song of change that was going on that totally affected my heart. So I had one foot on either side, and but my heart was on the side of the protest movements of the time. And finally, that side grew so strong, I'm sure with the help of marijuana, that I just said, I want to live that life. I don't want to live a straight life anymore. So, and I haven't looked back, and I haven't regretted anything.
So you didn't, it's so un-American because you didn't, we're supposed to be worried about financial security. We're supposed to be, and you just took off. You left a great job that you were even enjoying, and you had no way to support yourself. And I can't even imagine taking that leap.
Well, I lived very, Holly and I, we lived a very a cheap life. We lived in I paid a couple $100 rent, and out in Colorado, and just lived very cheaply. We only needed $8,000 or $10,000 a year so that's one way to do it. Just reduce your needs and have fun, and don't worry about putting away money for retirement. At least at that point, that's where we were.
What about the fact you mentioned you had 2 children with your first wife?
Yes.
And Holly had 2 children with her first husband, or I think. And what about you didn't strike me as a very attentive father.
No, that is the one. I have very few regrets in my life. The one was after my divorce. I saw my kids, but I was so wrapped up in my hippie life that I did not pay due attention to them when they were young and growing up in their teenage years. And we have a great relationship now. But I should have, and I don't know if you could blame marijuana for that or not. I was just, but I did not pay enough attention to my kids when they were living with my ex-wife and growing up. And I regret that, yeah.
No, you can't blame marijuana for it. You blame you were self-centered.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So they have forgiven you, and you have a good relationship.
Yes, it took a long time. My daughter took a long time to forgive me, but what's 20, 30 years in a long life?
Okay. Well, that's,
fine now, and I won't say that my children smoke marijuana, but I won't say that they don't either. Let's put it that way.
Well, geez, now you left me curious.
Yeah. Well, they enjoy life.
Do you drink alcohol?
I do, and not, yeah, I have a glass of wine every night, and actually I find that when I'm stoned, just a little sip of wine can kick in with the THC and lift me even higher. But if I have 2 or 3 glasses of wine, then that's a downer. Then that starts takes the edge off.
When do you recall the first time you got stoned?
Oh, first time I tried to get stoned, I was 19, and a guy working on a college paper with me in Detroit said, hey, here's a joint. I don't know what he called it, but he said, smoke it, and you'll know you're high when your legs get heavy. So I sat down in my bedroom in my parents' house and smoked it. And thought about, do my legs feel heavy? And it never happened. So I thought, well.
Nothing happened, right?
Well, yeah. So it's like a lot of people, the first time they do it, nothing happens. So I really waited until I was in my late 20s, another 8 or 10 years, before I really realized what it was all about. And it was more of a lift in the belfry rather than a heavy.
Yeah, heavy in the legs. I don't understand that at all.
No,
But
no.
your mother-in-law's reaction is the perfect one. You got your mother-in-law stoned,
Yeah.
and she said, "I don't feel anything. Nothing's happening. I don't feel," which is what you hear from people first time a
Right.
lot. Then she walked out the door.
Yeah, this was in Puerto Rico in the tropics. Walked out the door, and she was a country club woman who'd never used to be a drinker, but had given up drinking and had never found something to replace it. And so we walked out the door, and she was huffing, "Well, this didn't do anything to me. This doesn't work." I knew it wouldn't work. And we walked out the door, and she stood and looked around, and she said, "My Lord, listen to those birds." I said, "Oh, good." And after that, she started writing to Holly, my wife, and asked, "You think Tom could send me a few of those joints?"
So Holly came from some very these were wealthy, and I mean, I forget, her father was what?
Well, he was an advertising man. Yeah, they were a wealthy country club, suburban New York, wasps, and
I can't
right.
imagine how disapproving they would be of what their daughter did with her life.
Right, but she was a rebel, so she didn't care too much about that. And when her mother found out that it worked for her too, then she could go to cocktail parties, and even though she didn't drink anymore, she could quietly before the party, have a couple of puffs and be a bright presence. Good for her.
So the guy who wrote 7 Days in May, I'm blanking on his name.
Fletcher Knebel, yes.
Fletcher Knebel.
Knebel, Knebel, yeah.
Yeah, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He says, "Better to smoke when you're old." Mm-hmm. Now, why? What did he mean? That he thought pot was better for old people?
Because he pointed out, and he was 66 when he said this to me back in 70-something. He said everyone knows that old people get rigid in their thinking and rigid in their ways as they get older, and that pot would be the perfect thing to loosen up those rigid attitudes and feelings and relax. He felt it was the perfect time.
There'd be fewer Republicans if we could get old people smoking.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes, I think that would be a really good idea. So the other thing you said is you write stoned. Now, you've been a writer all your life, obviously, and a damn good one. And you write stoned. And you said, and I knew I write better stoned. I used to tell people that, too, because I was a television reporter. And I would say, my best stuff I write stoned. And people always would say the same thing to me. No, you just think it's better because you're stoned. And that's not true. I mean, when I have awards, given awards, invariably, they're for stories I did stoned.
Right. And
right.
When I first started smoking in writing, it was at the Washington Post, and I remember it was April of 1972, 44 years ago. The first story I wrote stoned. I smoked a joint in the company car coming home from this feature writing assignment, and all of a sudden the words to the story just came raining down through the roof of the car. Oh,
right.
That's great.
Right.
And I wrote it, and it made the editors put it on, Ben Bradley put it on page 1 because it was so well written. And all of a sudden I realized, hey, I've got an advantage over these other writers.
That's right.
And there was no reason to ever not write stone because it just illuminates my mind, makes me more creative, and but like I say, I've only been doing it since 1972, so we'll wait and see. Come in.
Well, me too, and it definitely, there's no doubt about it. Look at somebody like Louis Armstrong, who smoked every day of his life, and I bet he couldn't imagine playing that music without being stoned.
I didn't know he did that, but also my book is a front cover endorsement by Melissa Etheridge.
Yes.
Who says you will be changed by this book, and she not only used it in her recovery from cancer, but she smokes before she goes on stage because lifts her to the place she wants to be. And I think artists and musicians in general, jazz musicians, it's not news at all.
No, and that was always the thing. Well, those jazz musicians are the ones who are doing it. Well, there's a reason. There's a reason. A creative person becomes more so.
Exactly, and it happens. The federal government, in their anti-marijuana crusade all these years, one of the reasons they used to say that they besmirched grass because it was used by these black musicians,
yes, exactly,
Negro musicians, and brought up in backpacks from Mexico, marijuana. It was given this racist, So.
Right. I thought one of the most amazing stories you told. So after a while, you sort of learn carpentry and you build your own house and you and then you'd get freelance work writing for travel magazines.
Yeah.
What a nice gig that is. So the guy who leaves the Washington Post job, you think he's out of his mind, ends up landing jobs going all over the world.
Yeah, it was just the greatest life. And there was 25 years of that. And I mean, New Guinea and Iceland, Greenland, Madagascar, all the far-off places in the world. And it was just, but I would say half the time I took marijuana with me. If I thought it was too dangerous, I didn't, but I never got caught. And people would say, God, you're going to New Guinea, these exciting places. Why do you need to take grass with you? And I think, well, you can never have too much heightened awareness, can you? I mean, so that's just. Did you ever sample any of what the indigenous peoples used for, any other drugs that they were dabbling in? No, I should. When I was in South America, I should have taken advantage of ayahuasca, but I
didn't. You didn't.
No, I mean, I didn't try to, buy anything overseas. That seemed a little risky. I would just take it with me. Put a little stash inside a bottle of shampoo or something like that.
So you did get busted once.
Okay.
All right. I mean,
I got busted by the Border Patrol in the middle of California. The Border Patrol, within 200 miles of the Mexican border, they have a right to set up a checkpoint wherever they want and bust anybody, check them for drugs, and they still have that power. And I got busted in that way, and they.
But you had a medical medical marijuana certificate.
I had a card, and but they said, well, that gives you no right to drive through a federal checkpoint.
I guess right.
And so
you had a state card, and they're the feds.
And they said we will charge you. We're going to fine you $500, and confiscate your grass. But anyway, they said if you abandon your marijuana, we won't charge you the $500. And I said, if I abandon it, if I paid the fine, you'd still take the dope, right? They said, yeah, we would. I said, okay, I'll take your deal then. And they made me throw it away in the dumpster. But they forgot 2 marijuana cookies sitting right on my front seat that they missed. So, oh well.
So you drove away with a smile on your face anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your travel writing, I couldn't believe that you pulled off this thing where you and Holly were on this remote beach in Costa Rica, and you said, wouldn't it be great to have a little beach shack right here? And somehow, who did you talk into pretty much letting you do that whole thing and getting paid for it? What magazine?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a 3-part series on building a beach shack in Paradise. The editors loved it. And they sent Annie Leibovitz down to photograph us. I think I'm probably the least famous person Annie ever shot. So
Annie Leibovitz, the photographer to the stars, went down to Costa Rica and spent a few days photographing you and Holly.
And we hung out together, and it was just wonderful. And that is now the cover of the book, the Annie Leibovitz photo. And thank God she gave us that image for free.
Yeah, so I want to ask, who made your banana leaf thong and?
Well, Annie sort of directed that, but a friend, Annie paid a lady friend of ours $300 to be the stylist for the shoot, and so she dressed us up in palm fronds and banana leaves and shells and shell necklaces.
You were supposed to be Adam and Eve or something.
That's it, right.
Okay. Well, jeez. But it was that time when Holly starts noticing a tremor in her hand. That was the beginning of this turn.
Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
And it's a tragic story, but everybody,
Yeah.
It isn't. We don't see it as a tragedy, and the scene in our house, which is sort of an end of life scene. It is an end of life scene. It's not a sad place. Life goes on here, and Holly, with a little bit of cannabis oil, can enjoy quite a bit of humor and still keep living a life with some spirit left in it.
Have your children read the book?
I didn't want to. I have 2 children and 2 stepchildren. The stepchildren don't smoke and are kind of opposed to it, so I thought, well, they don't need to read it. But my kids will. But I didn't want to send it to them because I thought,
no.
Read Dad's book,
Well, aren't you sort of, I don't know. If I would read some of this about my parents, I would find it cringeworthy.
Yeah, well, maybe.
I would.
We'll see. I've only got one life, and I'm happy how I've lived it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one chapter in the book that is just so unsettling and doesn't sort of go with the rest of the book, and that is the murder of your brother. I mean, that is such an awful.
He was the straight brother. I was the stone brother, and he was the straight brother who lived his life very cautiously while I lived mine with abandon. And, of course, the irony is that he was at random kidnapped by a serial killer who escaped from prison, and he was eventually murdered. Yeah, this was in California. And one of the things that marijuana does for me is just, I have, as an old newspaper man, an abiding curiosity to find out what happened and to tell everybody about it. And marijuana just accentuates that kind of rabid curiosity. So a couple years later, I could not help but investigate what happened to Jerry, to find out how he spent his last evening on Earth with his killer. So the only way to do that was to contact the killer on death row in Arizona. And he told me the whole story. It was very gripping. And I was happy to learn that he and Jerry had a pretty nice evening driving down there together. Jerry showed him family pictures, and he thought he was going to live up until he died. So, that's a pretty chilling chapter. It's,
Yeah, it is, because the killer's voice is just presented. I mean, it's just mind. Do you know if he's been put to death?
He was eventually. It was like 13 years after the murder that he was finally executed.
He was executed.
Yeah, but in this long tape he sent to me, I was shocked to hear a man. He killed 8 people on this spree. He was a man with a sensitive, thoughtful-sounding man. I was shocked. I thought he'd be a crude, kind of foul-mouthed. No, not at all.
Not at all. This soft-spoken. He apologized, said, "I'm so sorry for the."
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, he never had. He never had a shot at a life. I mean, from the day he was born.
I actually felt sorry for the guy.
Yeah.
He grew up in Arkansas, and at the age of 10, he kept running away from home, so they put him in a reform school. And after 5 years in a reform school, he kept running away from there. Put him in the state prison at the age of 15, in Arkansas State Prison. You can imagine what that would have been like 50 years ago. And he never had a chance.
Yeah. Someone is emailing and asking, was the whole book cover staff stoned? Well, did Leibovitz get stoned with you?
No, Annie did not. That I recall. I don't recall that Annie got stoned with us. No.
Okay.
And maybe if she did, I probably wouldn't. I would leave that to her to reveal.
Okay. So, one of the things you say, which is so true, is that there are, if people only knew, there are politicians and governors and doctors and police officers and nurses and school teachers and ministers who smoke pot.
Sure. Yes, a lot of people do.
A lot.
Secretly, and they live two lives. They come home and they smoke, and then they go to work, and they,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I certainly, I don't hang out with anybody who would not be, comfortable with, if they don't want to, that at least letting people who want to. It's just, to me, it has been madness for so long, and the madness is starting to lift, obviously. Thank God.
And where does Pennsylvania stand with that?
Oh, God, Pennsylvania will be last and in a race with Mississippi to be the last state to...
Really?
Yeah, it's a very conservative state. They just legalized medical marijuana, but it won't be. They won't get it together and roll it out for another 2 years.
Right.
And it's a pretty restrictive bill.
That is the foot in the door.
That's the foot. Yeah, exactly.
That's why all the pot politicians are using these very sober arguments about, how the different cannabinoids can heal different things.
But
nobody talks about the high itself, which is what I write about. I mean.
Exactly. But, Tom, don't you think that what's finally going to put it over is not pot lovers, pot smokers, or medical marijuana? It's going to be capitalists.
Yes. And, the pharmaceutical companies are going to swoop in here. I don't think it would be any surprise to anybody. They are now breaking apart the cannabis compounds to find certain compounds work better for this. And you just know the pharmaceutical people are going to swoop in and trademark certain drugs, a whole bunch of them, which may or may not work. To me, the real healer is the high. The high is the healer, and not all these. But anyway, I just think that's going to happen. And the capitalist system, they're going to have probably Philip Morris is going to move in there and have huge grow operations. And I think that'll get swallowed up by, and that'll change the experience. You and I have known it as a subversive, a naughty kind of a thing to do.
Exactly.
That's part of the fun of it, and it's moving more as it moves into the mainstream. It'll be a more sober approach, but it doesn't stop us from having our fun when we smoke.
Well, the first time, I have to tell you this story, the first time my mother caught me smoking it, it was the smell that brought her to my room, and she said, "My gosh, what is that?" She says, it's, and here's what she said it was. It was like a moment that she was transported back to her childhood, because she said, "That's Asthmador."
What?
Asthmador.
It was used
Asthma, Asthma, Asthmador.
Yeah.
And I said, "Mom, it's marijuana." She said, "No, it's Asthmador. My dad used to, when he had asthma, would go down in the basement and burn some of this and inhale it."
Really?
Asthmador.
Well, it's funny that for asthma, which is a lung that he would smoke.
Isn't that weird? And he was a dentist and but I later looked it up, and there are other people who do recall Asthmador.
Well, it was used, as you probably know, for thousands of years by Chinese doctors and healers all over the world, and it was used in the United States as a medicine until the 20s and 30s and sold in pharmacies. And then the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover's pal Harry Anslinger came along and started demonizing it, reefer madness,
and you're saying there was a real racial element to it.
Yes,
exactly.
It was an anti-Mexican thing. It was brought up from Mexico, and it was tainted with that kind of racist image of black jazz musicians. So,
well, it turns out those black jazz musicians were onto something.
Yes, and so are we then.
Yeah, no, I just think it's the greatest, and I feel for people who don't get it, or because I mean, it is for some people. Do you think a person's chemical brain chemistry makeup? Some people, it's not a wonder drug. It makes them terribly self-conscious and paranoid. I mean, I've bumped into lots of folks like that.
Yeah, it sure isn't for everybody. A lot of people either does nothing for them, or but I do feel that if you're a fearful person in general, it probably will make you paranoid. I think people who are most helped by it are people who are generally optimists to begin with, upbeat personality to begin with, without a whole bunch of fears or inhibitions. And I think I class myself as one of those people. I think those are the people that really helps.
That's weird because I would never call myself an optimist.
Oh, really?
Ever. But pot lifts all of that off of me. So here's what I want to know.
Okay.
You smoke a joint, and then yes, a bug on your hand, a flower becomes the most fascinating thing. You can sit for hours looking at something that if you weren't stoned, you wouldn't even notice. Why can't you or I have the same appreciation for the mundane when we're straight? I mean, why don't we learn from the experience that pot offers us?
Well, I have a feeling that if you smoke, I smoke, I only take a toke or two at a time, but I do it maybe 8 or 10 times a day. And I think even when I'm not, quote-unquote, stoned, I think I'm still kind of up there.
Okay.
But that is true. And a lot of people say, well, why do you have to take this outside agent to get there? Well, I don't know. It works, and it doesn't harm anyone else. It's even good for my health, apparently. There's no reason not to. So that's what I feel.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you many, many happy days and evenings stoned, and I'm sorry that you're on this death watch now, but I really am.
Thank you, and it's been very nice. This is one of the most enthusiastic interviews I've had. You might watch your listeners might the Vice Media people are coming out to do a half-hour documentary on me and Holly and our use of cannabis oil.
Oh, okay.
And that may be on their Viceland channel sometime this summer.
Okay. And you know what? You just reminded me of your Tom Brokaw event. Because, I mean, can you tell that story really fast? I'm so sorry, but you wrote a piece about building a house and everybody, sort of smoking pot while they're doing it, and the Today Show called.
Right, the Today Show. I had a job as a house painter back in my hippie days, and I wrote an article about house building methods, and it just mentioned almost parenthetically that during the break times we get stoned. And the Today Show calls the next morning and say, would you come on the Today Show and talk about workers smoking marijuana on the job? And I said, well, sure. And I thought, well, that's really only a small part of the story. When I get on Brokaw's show, I'll make it plain that's not what the whole story is about. But, of course, that's what they wanted. So I came on the show, and Brokaw said, so, Tom, when you have a morning break, you don't have a coffee break, you smoke, you do what? And I smoke marijuana. He just boxed me in. And it sort of played fill in the blanks with me. And
he kept leading you with the question. So it was. I mean, you really felt ambushed, but
it was a funny incident, and it was the only way I could have gotten on the Today Show. But I call that chapter's called "Getting Brokawed."
Yeah, he did a job on you. He really did. Isn't that amazing, though? So their producers see that piece, and it's about something else. One little sentence.
That's the part they jumped on. Of course, that was during the period when, like I said, Jimmy Carter was in the Oval Office, and it was about to be legalized. So that was it's understandable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, we'll keep our eyes peeled for the Vice. They haven't shot it yet? You're saying they haven't come.
Shoot it in this month. Yeah.
Okay. The book?
Yeah.
What?
Well, I was just going to say, I asked them if they could not. Holly used to be a beautiful woman, and she's, pretty near the end now. And if they could shoot this without showing her face, and they were more than happy to do that. So we will create a little bit of a mystery there.
Ah.
About that. So.
Well, 40 Years Stoned, a journalist's romance. Tom Huth. I would have said Huth, but
Yeah.
did Brokaw pronounce the name right?
I can't remember.
Thanks so much. I truly appreciate it.
I really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That's Tom Huth, 40 Years Stoned. I detected a upper Midwestern accent. Did you? Detroit. He's from Detroit, but I don't think of people from Detroit saying "oh," but he has a little "oh." Milt has sent me the quote from that Harry Anslinger, who was FBI under the notorious J. Edgar Hoover. Let me see if I can read this. Here's his quote. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana use. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is the effect it has on the degenerate races. Wow. Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. Marijuana leads to pacifism. Oh, yeah. And communist brainwashing. You smoke a joint and you're likely to kill your brother. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. I mean, my God! And that kind of crap is still polluting the minds of Americans today. That was in 1930. Anslinger was the first commissioner of the Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics. It makes white women want to sleep with darkies. Unbelievable. Well, as you know, I've always been pretty open about pot myself, so I appreciate that aspect of what he's doing. It's sort of like gay people coming out of the closet is what turned it's why we got gay marriage. And I really wish that more of my cohort, because now they're judges, ladies and gentlemen, they're doctors, they're mayors and senators. They're justices on Supreme Courts. I wish they, damn it, would come out. And we could just stop this craziness now. Sick of it. Well, there. I feel better. Let's see. What else we got here? Okay. This is from our listener in Asia, Bree Freeman. He said, I shared yesterday's show with friends from the Philippines. That's when I mentioned their lovely new president. He said, I got many different reactions. One was very surprised that you were following or interested in their politics. Couldn't believe that. Yeah, well, I know, it's un-American, but I'm an oddball. I was probably stoned. Another said that you don't understand the situation there. Well, that's true too. It is not like Pittsburgh or the U.S. Another said, wait and see, wait and see. And finally, a fourth said, don't believe everything you read in your newspaper. I asked them to call or email you directly, so we'll see. I'll be in Asia this summer and in Pittsburgh this summer. Well, that's nice. So that's what you hear from Trump people. It's the same thing. This is the Philippines Trump. So I can't believe the way I'm already hearing CNN and all the others now. They've all shifted. He's the nominee. And they're talking. It's like, person after person is coming on and saying exactly that kind of thing. Well, he is the nominee, and we got to get behind him, and we have many things here which we agree with, and I am sure that blah, 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 and the people want him, and so we're... And it's like now, it doesn't... I was out to dinner with friends last night, and one of them looked like she was just gonna... She said, I actually think he's going to win. And you know what? You cannot say to somebody who says that, oh, you can't. Because he damn well could. Can you imagine? I really do think, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, these are fascistic beginnings. Donald Trump does not have to be Hitler. These are fascistic. He understands the use of media to guide, control, excite. He is aided and abetted by television, news, media. So he reaches huge audiences. CNN's ratings are like almost double what they were. They are charging 40 times for a 30-second political spot than they did last cycle. There is no principle there. None. The capitalists, I've said it again, have won. They have won. They control our media. What is the fascism? Capitalists are part of the picture. Money and power, part of the picture. Media, part of the picture. The strongman demagogue who is so, think of Hitler. Was anybody more repulsive? Even in his look. He was just repulsive. And I feel the same way about Trump. It doesn't matter. They both somehow, and with Trump it's just lost on me because of his ineloquence, his talking on like a second grade level, his good God in heaven, his ability, even though he presents this extraordinarily caricaturable persona, even with that strong persona, he's a blank slate that millions of people are putting all of their desires upon. So that even when he says things that they don't like, or he does things that they don't like, they just bat them away because they have to see him for what they want him to be. So it's almost like, mass delusion. People ask, how the hell did that happen in Germany? You don't think the same kind of forces are at work? Guys, seriously, you don't? Germany was a democracy. It was a republic. I'll move on. So, did you see these new parents in India? Did you see them? The father's 79. Great. Holding his little son. 79 years old. But guess how old the mother is? She's 70. She gave birth. She's 70. 79 and 70. Her first child, she said she did IVF treatment at a fertility clinic, and she got pregnant, and she had a healthy boy. 79 and 70. 70 being the one that's mind-blowing. What I think about that, we'll leave unsaid. You can, unbelievable. Can't even imagine. And the other thing I came upon, this is bizarre. This was in the Wall Street Journal today. So we're talking about the Philippine election. And so even as the people of the Philippines, this very Catholic country, elect as their president a guy who called the Pope a son of a whore, who joked about raping a dead missionary who'd been killed by terrorists, who created death squads. They also elected to their Senate a transgendered woman. Now, I got to tell you, you think the U.S. of A. would elect a transgender woman to the Senate? The Philippines. Yike. Okay, and the other story that's just too wonderful is the turkey flying through the window of the bus here. Did you hear about it? Geez. I mean, remember, we were talking a few weeks ago about a turkey flying in through somebody's bathroom window in Point Breeze and then doesn't kill him. He's bleeding. He's in the bathtub bleeding, and he manages to get back out. This bird, too, flies through a bus windshield into the bus, and the bus driver very coolly stops the bus, could have lost control of the bus, opens the door, and the turkey exits. I do not believe it was one of the designated stops, though, and I think the driver could get into trouble with that. But yeah, beware of flying turkeys. That's the second one we know of, flying through windows here. And one of the friends I had dinner with last night was actually biked across the state, because she's nuts. She biked from Philly to Pittsburgh in a day and a half. Can you imagine? And one of the highlights of the trip was going through, in the dark of night, some marshy area in the middle of the state. She spooked a bunch of ducks, and one of the ducks flew right into her. She heard quack, 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 and then she gets hit in the chest by a flying duck and almost lost control of her bike, but managed to stay upright. And, you sort of wonder, who was more startled, her or the duck? I don't know, but they both apparently shook it off. Beware! It's like the birds. I'm serious. They're starting to attack. Flying turkeys! All right, it's a little early, but I am done. I am so done. I am so done. I am so done. So, tomorrow, we'll talk again. Toodles.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.